Good evening, all. Welcome to the online public information meeting for the proposed rezoning of the sites known as 512, 520 Main Street in the Nutana neighborhood. My name is Tony Wood. I'm a planner with the City of Saskatoon Development Review section, and I'll be your moderator this evening. I'd like to start off by acknowledging that the land upon which we broadcast and the land that we are discussing today is Treaty 6 territory and the homeland of the Métis Nation. As you're all probably aware, the city is conducting all public consultation online at this time due to the COVID-19 pandemic. This Teams live event is one of the many ways that we are attempting to facilitate adequate public consultation while remaining physically distanced. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and will be posted on our Engage page afterwards. This will allow residents who are unable to participate to watch the video in the future. I'd like to start off by introducing the wonderful city staff who have made this live event a possibility. First and foremost being Daryl Dawson. Daryl is the Development Review Section Manager and the project lead who will be presenting on behalf of and responding to questions for the administration. I would also like to make everybody aware of the several city staff who are joining us tonight to keep things running smoothly in the background. They are Haven Reese and Tanner Hallinan. Their assistance with previous and current online public information meetings has been essential. I would of course like to introduce the applicants, our representatives from 102-065-776 Saskatchewan Limited, and Jason Hurd from AODBT Architecture, who will also be presenting on the proposed development. And last but definitely not least, Councillor Cynthia Block has graciously agreed to join us tonight. I will now turn the presentation over to her for opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Tony. I wouldn't miss it. Thank you so much for having me. I am going to listen with interest to hear what everyone has to say tonight. I want to thank our staff for diligently preparing this presentation and working with the proponents on a number of, I will say, traffic issues and parking and all sorts of things that are done diligently over the course of many months to make sure that when a proposal comes to the community, it is at a stage where there have been much of the problem solving has already been done. So what I'm hoping to hear tonight are any concerns that you have, any things you like about it, things that you think could be improved. So I will be listening to hear how this project fits into our growth plan and also how our administration and the proponents have considered the residents in the area to ensure that this is a good fit for the neighborhood. Anyways, thanks so much for having me, and I look forward to the evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Block. Now, before continuing, I would like to briefly outline the structure of our meeting this evening. Firstly, we'll be hearing the presentation from the administration, outlining the proposed amendments and how these would function within existing policy. Following this, we'll have a presentation from the applicant, wherein they'll provide an outline of their proposed development. Afterwards, we'll begin the question and answer period. At that point, I'll be outlining the Q&A function on Teams Live, as well as reviewing our code of conduct. Similar to our regular in-person public information meetings, we'll be requesting that you save your questions until the end of the presentation. Once we have responded to all questions or reached the end of our allotted time at 8:30, I will offer some closing remarks and end the live event. I will now turn the virtual mic over to Daryl for the presentation from the administration, which will immediately be followed by the applicant's presentation.
Good evening, and thank you, Tony and Councillor Block, for that introduction. I just want to take a moment to thank everybody for taking some time out of their evenings to join us tonight. So this meeting is to provide information and answer questions on an application received from AODBT Architect and Interior Design on behalf of the numbered company represented by Connie and Brian Shank. Now, to rezone 512, the application is to rezone 512 through 520 Main Street to facilitate the development of a multiple unit dwelling subject to a zoning agreement. So we have an air photo up on the screen that shows the location of the properties. They're just east of the Extra Food on Broadway, just to the immediately, or just to the west of the parking lot, I should say. One unit dwellings constructed in the late 40s and 50s currently occupy the site. And there are 3-story multiple unit dwellings located on the north side of Main Street, a 7-story multiple unit dwelling right immediately west of the proposed development site, and 1 unit dwellings located to the south. Can we get the next slide, please? The proposed rezoning to an RM5 district, subject to an agreement, will provide for development of a 6-story multiple unit dwelling on the site. The proposed development contains a mix of housing styles, including at-grade townhouses with entry onto the street, apartment-style condominiums, and a penthouse suite. Next slide, please. The proposal does provide 77 on-street or on-site parking spaces. That number would be in line with the zoning requirements for that district. 13 of those parking spaces are just off the lane, and 64 of the parking spaces are an enclosed structure, some of those at grade in garages and other in an underground parkade. There are existing boulevard trees adjacent to these properties, and the applicant will be working with the city's urban forestry group on a tree protection plan for these trees. And the applicant will be talking a little bit more about the building design and the style of the building in their presentation. Next slide. Now, in some instances, a regulatory tool called a zoning agreement may be used when a specific development is proposed as part of a rezoning application. Now, a zoning agreement is a legal tool and a legal agreement that, if approved by City Council, is tied to the land and ensures that only the specific development proposal put forward by the applicant can be constructed on that property. So for this proposal, a zoning agreement would provide for the 6-story multiple unit dwelling. It would identify a maximum of 50 dwelling units and would identify other site requirements and provide information that would tie it to the layout and the overall design that you'll see tonight. Next slide. To accommodate the proposed development, an amendment to the official community plan land use map will also be required to change the land use designation from a medium density residential designation to a high density residential. So this high density residential designation would be the same that is applied to the 7-story apartment immediately to the west of the site. The current land use designation and current zoning would provide for a multiple unit dwelling that's about 3 to 4 stories in height, and the amendments would provide for the 6-story building. Now, the intent of a high density residential land use designation is to enable the development of a range of residential buildings types and community uses. Next slide. So there has been a local area plan done for Nutana, and in evaluating that proposal, the local area plan against this proposal, there were components of that local area plan that this proposal did align with. It did protect and enhance housing options in the Broadway area by providing opportunities for various housing choices and for people to live in the area. It did protect the human scale of development to promote the street orientation of commercial and residential development. You'll hear more detail about how the main floor units on this development do enter right onto the street. And it reflects the historic residential character of the area by ensuring that street-oriented development. Well, there is also a Broadway 360 plan that was done for the area, and that does define neighborhood character areas, including the Main Street corridor and higher density development. There was a resulting architectural overlay zoning district, but that was only applied to the commercial area of Broadway and does not include these properties. Now we'll go to the next step slide. Thank you. So for the next steps of this proposal, administration, after this public consultation is over, will evaluate the comments we hear. And when we're ready to move forward, we will prepare a report to the Municipal Planning Commission. The Municipal Planning Commission is an advisory committee that will provide a recommendation on the proposal to City Council, along with administration's recommendation. Our administrative report will summarize comments we hear from the public consultation and our technical review. The earliest we would be able to take forward a report to the Municipal Planning Commission would be the end of January 2021. Following Municipal Planning Commission, all applications need to be considered at a public hearing at City Council. And before that public hearing, we do place ads in the newspaper. We will be updating our Engage page with those dates as well. At the public hearing, City Council will hear administration's report. They will consider Municipal Planning Commission's report and hear from any members of the public that may wish to speak. As noted, the application will be updating the Engage page with those dates and to provide any timeframes that our application will be moving forward. So at this point, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Jason Hurd with AODBT to discuss further details of the proposal.
Thanks so much, Daryl. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for attending tonight's presentation. It's a pleasure to be here on behalf of our clients to represent them and to present their project. Our clients, Connie and Brian Shank, have roots in Saskatoon, and because of that, they have an understanding of the special character of the Broadway neighborhood. They also have a real interest in working to enhance that neighborhood with this development. They really believe that a place with so many great amenities can only benefit from a project of this increased scale and size. Working with them, it was pretty clear. Oh, thank you. Yeah, we can move to that slide. Working with them, it was pretty clear that they had a real focus on creating a building that brought something special to the Broadway neighborhood, and doing that through a mix of different housing types contained in one building, which really could cater to a number of different demographics: young professionals, working families, or even retirees that are looking to downsize but stay in the neighborhood. So this is the site plan, and Daryl talked a little bit about this, but just to reiterate, our parcel is obviously that we're developing is the hatched out portion in the center, which would represent the building. But the site is bordered by Main Street along the north, Broadway to the farther east, a lane access to the immediate east, a rear lane to the south, and an existing 7-story building to the west. Next slide, please. So just focusing a little bit more on the site itself, one of the defining features of the site is really the row of existing heritage elms along Main Street. They're really one of the most important assets of the Broadway neighborhood, and our team worked really closely with urban forestry to prepare a design that would address that and would provide minimal impact to those trees and really maintain them as an asset as the project was developed. As mentioned previously, there is rear lane access, so that gave the project the opportunity to have a mixture of surface parking and also underground parking access from the rear lane. The other thing this site plan really shows is, and I'll get into this a little bit more as I get into the building plans, but if you look along the north side, and Daryl did mention this, there are 2-story townhouses along the first couple levels of the project, and the idea behind those was really to address the street in a traditional way to help reinforce the residential character of Main Street. So you do actually have traditional style front entrances and traditional style front yards along Main Street. Go to the next slide. Yeah, thank you. So the building plans here, from the 1st to the 6th floor, if you can see the 1st and 2nd floors, those are really the townhouse units. Again, the building was designed to address the street. And then from the 3rd floor up to the 6th floor, we have a mixture of condominium, apartment-style condominium units in a combination of 1 and 2 bedroom units. These plans also show the amenity space that's been programmed into the building. So that's the green blocks that you see in the plans, which are a mixture of balconies and other types of amenity space in the building. But they also indicate how the building steps back as it rises up. Really to minimize impact on the street visually, but also from a shadowing point of view. The massing of the building was really designed to minimize the impact of shadows on the street. By virtue of the location of the site, which is on the south side of Main Street, there's an adjacent lane on the east side, a fairly wide boulevard along the north. Main Street's a 2-way street with a very large landscape median down the center. From our perspective, the shadow patterns will be very minimal and should have minimal effect on the neighbors. But this section, it's kind of an interesting one because it also shows how if you were to kind of take a slice through our building and through Main Street, you can see Main Street on the right and the existing trees shown to scale on the right, and then our building on the left. You can see how the building really pulled back from the trees to protect the root base and to protect the canopy, and continues to step back as it goes up to the 6th floor. We can have the next view. Yeah, thank you. So the exterior design of the building, it is contemporary, but again, the townhouse units along the first 2 floors help reinforce that traditional scale at the street level and that traditional massing. And you can see an indication of the front yards. So really kind of a traditional front yard, front porch, front door along Main Street. And the intent in terms of materials is really to use premium exterior finishes, which will just ensure the quality and longevity of the building. Next slide, please. This is one of my favorite views. It's looking west from Broadway, kind of the corner of Broadway and Main, but it really gives a fairly accurate indication of what the building would look like if you were looking kind of across the Extra Foods parking lot. You can see it peeking up, but you can also see it in comparison to the scale of the tree canopy and the existing Lux condominium over to the left. And I think we have one more slide after this. Yeah, so the intent of this view, and our building is the one in pink, kind of in the middle, was really to illustrate our building within its neighborhood context. So you can see, there are quite a large number of larger scale buildings within close proximity to the building, but I think this also gives a really good sense of how we work to, manipulate the building massing to make sure that it fit into the streetscape and blended well and worked well with the neighborhood. I think so that kind of concludes my very quick presentation on the design, but I'm happy to turn it back over to Tony for questions.
Excellent. Thank you both, Jason and Daryl, for your presentations. Those were great, provided a great summary of the project and how it would kind of fall in line with some of our city policies here. So as mentioned at the top of this live event, I'm now going to be going over the question and answer period. The Microsoft Teams user guide provided on our Engage page would greatly assist with this. So for all you folks doing tonight, that is on our Engage page as a little walkthrough document. That being said, I'm just going to go over the Q&A function right now with you. So on the Teams Live application, you should see an icon for this Q&A function. It's going to look like a couple bubbles. One has a question mark on the inside. Once clicked, it should display the title Live Event Q&A. If you'd like to submit a question or comment, click on the big purple button at the bottom that says Ask a Question. This will take you to the My Questions tab, where you can type a question into the Ask a Question box. I promise I've made it sound more confusing than it is. Participants are expected to ask questions, make comments, and behave in a manner that is respectful of all participants in the meeting. Appropriate and relevant questions will be published in the Featured tab for all to see. Furthermore, if you see a question that you'd like to have answered in the Featured tab, you can have it marked with a thumbs up. This helps popular questions rise to the top instead of having multiple people submitting the same question. Unfortunately, the Teams Live Q&A function does not facilitate voice communication at this time. If you'd like to make your concerns known to our office verbally, my direct contact is shown here on the current slide, which we'll kind of be referring back to throughout this Q&A function. So presenters, as questions are published, I'll be reading each aloud and directing them to the appropriate party. In some cases, this may involve multiple people, in which case I'll provide a speaking order. I have a feeling that many of these will go towards both Jason and Daryl, who just presented to us here. So I think that covers off most of the necessary information about the Q&A session. If you haven't already, please have your questions submitted at this time. All right, so it looks like we don't have any questions for the time being. So maybe while we're waiting for some of those questions to roll in, we've heard from some area residents throughout the week and the week prior to this, both positive and kind of negative or having some questioning about the project. So on both sides. One item that we ended up hearing was just kind of some questions about the construction time frame. As we understand it, there has been some construction on this portion of Main Street, kind of headed westbound, with the Beto Tower going up at Main and Broadway. So perhaps a question for Jason or Connie and Brian, whoever would prefer to speak to this, but do any of you have somewhat of a construction time frame, or would be able to speak towards access to the lane or access to Main Street during construction time?
Connie, if you'd like me to comment on that, I'm happy to. You know, beyond this level of presentation on a project of this size, there's a long period of detailed design work that has to happen for us to produce construction drawings to actually be able to build this building. Coupled with kind of the unknowns in the world at the moment with COVID and the timing of everything kind of being a bit of a question mark. It's my understanding that the clients want to kind of deal with getting the rezoning portion of the project done up front, and then would look to the future to construct the building. So I think in terms of immediate impacts to the site, you know, this project certainly would fall behind the Beto project that's currently under construction. Excellent.
Thank you, Jason. So we do have some questions coming in here, which is great. First question here, is there a plan yet for where the access will be to the underground parking lot at the rear lane? And I believe there was a site plan shown earlier in the slideshow. Jason, would you perhaps be able to speak towards this underground parking access?
Yeah, that's correct. The ramp for the underground parking is on the southwest corner of the building, the southwest corner of the site, off the rear lane.
Excellent. So we have that coming up here. Okay. So as you can see, yeah, so on that, yeah, that's southwest there. Okay. Excellent. Thanks for responding to that there, Jason. Next question here. Just noting that there are quite a few high population buildings in the area currently, either under construction or existing. So that's going to be including the Beto structure at the corner of Main and Broadway, which we've spoken to earlier in this presentation, and the existing apartment to the west. Just some questions about what are the rules over density? Are there any kind of development standards that regulate building density and residential density in this area? Perhaps I could get Daryl to speak to this question.
All right, thank you, Anthony. Mm-hmm. That's an excellent question, and the question about density within our city. There are guiding policies and documents that we will look to in our evaluation of how much density should be in certain areas of the city. One of the first aspects is the growth plan to 500,000 that was adopted by the city. That does look at promoting infill to ensure that we have a sustainable growth within Saskatoon. That growth plan looks at strategic growth nodes such as north downtowns, university lands, but there's also along corridors and strategic infill opportunities. So there is that overall larger document. Our official community plan also describes where our density would go within our city. So looking a little more specifically at Broadway, the Broadway district in itself does provide for a higher density development along that corridor of Broadway or along that street of Broadway. And there are nodes that go out from Broadway, such as Main Street and some other along the flanking streets of Broadway that do provide for some of that higher density. So there are those policies that we do look at to ensure that development does fit the density for an area. There are other technical matters we also have to look at. We want to make sure that any development can be serviced appropriately. So part of our technical review for this sort of proposal was to ensure that water sewer can be provided on the site without impacting other properties. So I can advise that through our technical review, it can be met. So that question about density, there's no cap prescribed, but what we look at is how that fits within our policies, both within the official community plan and larger policies like the growth plan. It's a great question. I hope I've answered it for you, and if you need to discuss that further, please make sure you reach out to us to discuss some more.
Excellent. Thanks, Daryl. Still kind of waiting for some questions to roll in here. If any of y'all out there tonight have some more questions, feel free to send them in. For the time being, I know, Councillor Block, you've had some really great insights in the past on previous rezonings, and maybe if you had some questions that maybe some folks out in the community have been reaching out, or just some questions that you just had on the mind as a resident of this area. So if you, would you be able to speak to this at all, or if you have any questions about it?
I mean, as a resident of this area, as a matter of fact, I do live quite close.
Okay.
But I obviously represent the area. I am council's strategic lead for downtown development. I, at the moment at least, sit on the boards of both the Downtown Business Improvement District and the Broadway Downtown Business Improvement District. So there's a lot of, and I'm involved with the Newtown Community Association, like trying to get like the full wide angle lens of how to grow a city in the right way. Is really the collaboration of many people from many different walks of life and many different attributes to help build a city that is both sustainable economically and environmentally, but also respectful of the neighborhoods that they're going to exist in. And so I guess one of the questions I have, I heard at the beginning of this presentation that this project would not be considered against the architectural overlay for the Broadway district because it's just outside of it. And I'm curious to understand how it would, how it deters or how it goes away from what those overall architectural controls are. And I guess the reason I ask is that I know that the height is certainly within, and some of the characteristics of the project that I've seen seem to fit into the Broadway architectural plan. So just in what ways does it diverge?
Yeah, that's a great question. Sorry, Daryl, did you want to speak to that, or?
Yeah, thank you for that. And that's a great question, Councillor Block. And that's an angle. I'm going to have to say to tell you exactly how it doesn't meet. I will see what I can come up with at some point during this presentation. So I'm going to look at it, because what I can tell you is how I feel, or our analysis, how it does meet, and that's what we've focused on. One of the aspects of the architectural control district that is on Broadway proper talks about creating a pedestrian scale, about ensuring buildings that it's comfortable for people walking down the street, and you're not at a big wall. So what we have in this building design is a step back after 2 stories. So that reduces that building mass, and the Broadway architectural overlay districts talk about and ensure that we have that step back at a certain height in buildings. It also has the entries of the townhouse units onto the street, which promotes that pedestrian access onto the street, which was another characteristic of that Broadway 360 plan, about ensuring that we don't have blank walls and just one door into buildings, about creating the building that's interactive with the street. As we go through other questions, I'm going to see if I can come up with ways it does not align, because I know it's those main components that really were important in this design. One of the aspects from a planning perspective is that we knew this site could be developed for a multiple unit dwelling, but when an alternative design wall higher than what could be built there provided step backs and building articulation. So instead of just a square building mass, we got a nicely step back building, but it also brought those two-story street townhouse units into play, which we wouldn't normally see in an apartment style building, which we felt was important to the character of the Broadway area, to ensure we had that street townhouse feel that we see in other areas of Newtown and Varsity View neighborhoods. So it was those characteristics that we saw aligned with the overall architectural design of the area, as well as ensuring that there was options for residents to live in the area, just more on a policy perspective. But that reverse on it is a good question, and we'll look into that to see what we can find on how it doesn't align.
Yeah, thanks for that answer. Mr. Dawson. I think it was just more of a curiosity because it seemed that for a lot of the pieces that the presentation spoke about, that it indeed does. And the preservation of the trees is just it's a constant mantra in Newtana, both through the community associations, through the business improvement district, and through conversations and emails and telephone calls with many residents. So I was pleased to see that. I have a question of the proponents, pardon me, I'm wondering about the size of the unit. Can you just give me an indication of, can you remind me, first of all, how many units, and then roughly the different sizes of units?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a total of 50 units in the building, and they range in size from about 543 square feet, which is a 1-bedroom unit, to about 975 square feet, which would be the 2-bedroom unit. And those would be the largest. And there's a bit of a range in between, but
okay. Okay, and one other question for the proponent. I'm curious about the design on the east side of the building. How did that come to be part of the design?
That's a great question. I think, and I probably have to just take a step back and maybe address the question you had earlier about the Broadway overlay. I think it really speaks to the vision of our clients, understanding that we didn't have to necessarily follow those guidelines, but knowing that the best quality product for this site would follow those guidelines. And our firm has worked with the Broadway guidelines on a number of different projects in the past. So it was fun and interesting, and I think really responsible to bring that to this project and to work to enhance the neighborhood that way. And again, this is sort of branching off from that, but the idea of potentially having, a local artist or, really a local artist propose some sort of art feature for the side of the building. That is the elevation that's most prevalent from Broadway. So pedestrian traffic up and down the street would be able to see that. And you kind of got an indication of that in the view that we showed. But again, it was just, how can the project give back to the neighborhood and give back to the street? And the image that's on that rendering is by no means the final image, but it is an indication of potential for that location.
I'm really glad I asked the question, because I didn't realize that the photo was just a rendition of an idea of how it could look, and that potentially a local artist could be involved in the overall look of the building. That's a fascinating, interesting piece that I have not seen done in development in our city before. And so, I'll just, give credit where credit is due on that. That's a very exciting idea. So congratulations on that. I think that the more that the development community can be not only considered and respectful of the existing area in terms of trees and setbacks and shadowing and traffic and all of those kinds of things, but to think creatively about how best to fit into the area and how to be a contributor to the space and not just an additional buildings, or sorry, additional density is very encouraging to me. So thank you very much. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Councillor Block. We actually have a couple of the questions that have now come in, so I'll be directing those at this time. We have a question here come in. It says, will any parking areas on the street in front of the new building be reserved for visitor parking to this building? And if not, will there be street visitor parking provided in the plan? Okay, so just some general questions about what kinds of visitor parking would be provided and whether on-street would be reserved for the structure. Perhaps something that I could get our development review manager, Daryl, to speak towards.
Thank you, Anthony. And just to start in response to that question, one of the components about this proposal that also aligns with the Newtana local area plan and the Broadway 60 plan was that parking for the project would be off of the lane, so not accessing or not having a driveway crossing on the lane. So that does leave that street parking available From at this point, that would still be public parking, subject to the current parking requirements. So there's no visitor parking per se. Any visitors coming into the building would have to find a parking space as any person visiting the Broadway area would. Under zoning, there are certain requirements that there are visitor parking spaces for the building be provided on site. So just a quick look at the zoning check based on the current information we have. 6 parking spaces would have to be provided for visitors coming to the building on the site. So would likely be one of those 8 on street. It could be some underground parking, but we would be looking at designated on-site visitor parking, keeping the street parking available for residents of the area or people visiting the Broadway commercial area.
Excellent. Thanks, Daryl. So another question, really great questions this evening, might I add. Will there be any other steps taken other than scaling back the upper stories so that the building is less invasive towards the houses sharing the laneway? So looking at that south elevation, will there be any design elements that would mitigate impacts to buildings sharing that rear laneway? Perhaps I could get Jason to speak towards the design of that south frontage.
Sure, thanks, Tony. The rear elevation isn't visible in the views that I showed. However, it does have balconies which would face onto the lane. The way that we've kind of assumed that this would play out is a number of different potential options for screening on the balconies. We have used opaque glass or translucent glass on balconies and balcony screens to provide that sense of privacy. It's something that the residents typically want inside the unit as well as neighboring properties. So that's something that we would employ as the details work out in the design.
Excellent. Thank you, Jason. Just hanging on here for some more questions to roll in, if any come in here. So,
Anthony, was there any general questions that we got just from our communications from residents of the area that we could perhaps just reflect on to share with those that have joined us tonight? Like you said, you were saying that we did have some letters of support, but there were some other letters of concern. Is there any other ends we haven't covered yet tonight that we could maybe discuss quickly?
Just trying to think about these comments that we've received here. I have them written down. Perhaps there were some questions about the rear lane, access. Again, I guess kind of further to that last question, it seems like there is some interest in this building's impact on the rear lane, particularly during construction. As I understand it, sometimes when a building is under construction, there can be some it can impede traffic flow and access to the rear lane. So perhaps I could get the proponent to speak towards should this development reach that stage at the building and development permit stage and enter the construction phases, what would your intentions be for rear lane access?
Yeah, thanks, Tony. I think if this proceeds to construction, we would have to work with the city and also kind of work with the client to put together a detailed phasing plan for how the lane closures would work, especially to try to minimize the impact to the neighbors as much as possible. But that would probably be our first step, is looking at how we could phase the construction or site access to be able to minimize that impact.
Excellent. Thank you, Jason. And another question coming in about the construction here. So beyond taking care of the trees adjacent to the building, I know, Jason, you had mentioned the elm trees at the front there. Are you prepared to assist in the caring for the central boulevard on Main Street after construction is finished? So perhaps the proponent could speak towards intention of tree protection on that central boulevard there.
Thanks, Tony. Sorry, was that with respect to the median in the middle of Main Street?
Yes, I believe, or yeah, they say central boulevard, so we'll say the median in the middle of the street there.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I think that our intent would be to follow the city requirements with respect to protecting that vegetation during construction as much as we can. Obviously, we would do the same thing with the boulevard trees right in front of the site too.
Excellent. Thank you again for that, Jason.
Anthony, I can maybe add to that as well.
Sure. Yeah, for sure, Daryl. Go right on ahead.
Maybe just adding to that as well, and that's a good question about that boulevard maintenance. So typically within the city, we look at residents or property owners being responsible for that boulevard right in front of their property. But that center median boulevard does fall within the parks, city park department for maintenance. So there would be an expectation of these developers, as well as anybody with the boulevard in front of their property, to take care of that, but not the expectation of that center median. But if there are issues with that maintenance, while it's not our department that would be involved with the maintenance of that center median, you can let us know and we can pass on those concerns to the Parks Department. But that is a good question about that maintenance of those boulevard areas.
Agreed. Thank you again for speaking to that, Daryl. All right. Still no other questions coming in here.
Add to the boulevard question.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Councillor Block, did you have something to say towards that?
I guess I thought it just might be appropriate to let folks know that the engagement for the review of our boulevard maintenance program has just opened up, and it's on saskatoon.ca/engage. And we're interested to hear from folks about ways that we can do a better job of maintaining our center medians and our side boulevards. I brought this motion forward at council, I believe, in 2017. It was very early in my career as your city councilor, but it's something that I see every single day in our community, and something that I don't see in communities that are in the suburbs. That somehow we need to figure out a way to ensure that the boulevards and the center medians in our historic neighborhoods are keeping pace with growth and are able to be beautified in ways that we see elsewhere in our city. And to that end, I think I would just add one further point, that there is another motion before council with regards to finding tools to give back to infill neighborhoods. We don't know for sure how that might work at this time. Some ideas are development fees. Some of them that are under consideration are the potential for tax incremental financing, so that the lift on the tax base, some portion of which gets returned to the neighborhoods where the infill happens, in order to make some improvements. And so whether that's park space or better sidewalks, making sure we have accessibility. I had a great suggestion about an amenity that potentially could happen in the park at Newtown Collegiate involving dogs. And who knows what the community would support, but it's just important to me that as we add growth and density to our neighborhoods, our historic neighborhoods, that growth is keeping pace. And I think that the center boulevards are strategic and important to the community to make sure those are well maintained. So those are just some of the things that are on the horizon. And I realize now, like when I'm talking to folks, I should be looking at the camera, right? Instead, I'm looking down at the little icons on the bottom. We're all getting used to how to roll with the virtual online meetings, but for the most part, I think the information has been excellent, and it's been a great forum to almost have more of a conversation. So I too will say that if there's anybody that wants to reach out to me to talk about any of this further, I would be happy to hear from you. You can also find me at saskatoon.ca/Cynthia Block, super easy. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Block. An excellent opportunity to make people aware of that engagement with the center medians there. I guess at this point, we haven't really heard from our proponents here, Connie and Brian, at all through this presentation, and I maybe just wanted to pose a question to them. Is there anything in particular you'd like to have said about this development? Why are you excited about it, and what kind of aspects would you like people attending tonight to be aware of?
Thank you, Anthony. Hello, everyone. My name is Connie Shank, and this is Brian Shank. And we have had a passion for a long time to bring a unique building to the Broadway area that we are proud to walk past, somewhere that will allow a mix of anywhere from students and young families to retirees to be able to stay in the Broadway area and have access to all the amazing amenities, little shops, restaurants, hairdressers. My favorite hairdresser who, I feel like for 15 years has been my hairdresser, is on the Broadway area, and I have followed her to that area. And it's just such a vibrant community. And again, we want to bring something that's unique to the city and something we're proud and other residents are proud to be a part of the Broadway area. So.
When I was younger, I lived easy walking distance to Broadway and really enjoyed the amenities and the character of Broadway. And it would be nice for lots of people, both maybe younger single people and also families and older people as well, to be able to all find a space in this building, because I think it provides a lot of options to a diverse group of people.
Excellent. Thank you, Connie and Brian. That's some very lovely sentiments there. It's a really cool building.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess maybe, one other question that we had, perhaps we could maybe get Jason to speak towards, and I suppose this is something that, could be discussed later down the line on detailed design. But are there any kind of sustainable design components that are proposed or that could be incorporated into this structure that have been kind of contemplated to date?
That's a good question, Tony. Thank you for that. I can say that honestly, at this point, there aren't any features that we've looked at. However, the way that our office works, we have a long history of LEED projects in the province and environmentally sensitive projects. So a lot of the knowledge that we gained from that work, we've carried over into our day-to-day practice in terms of detailing and specifications of materials. Low VOCs, greener products all across the board. So I think we would bring that kind of knowledge to the project. But I think Connie and Brian are very open to interesting and innovative ideas. So that's something that we would probably discuss more with them further down the road. Thank
Excellent.
you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thank you, Jason. Yeah, it's definitely a further down the line question, but just thought we'd throw it out there. So
yeah.
We don't have any other questions coming in since the last one here. So I suppose with that, I might wrap things up here. I would like to make folks aware that just because you didn't get your questions in tonight doesn't mean that you can't reach out to make our office as well as the applicant aware of any concerns or questions. My contact is directly on this last slide here, as well as on our Engage page on the City of Saskatoon website. So yeah, for the next couple weeks here, feel free to reach out. But yeah, aside from that, I think this this covers off the evening. So thanks again to everybody involved. All the city staff, the applicants for attending this evening, Councillor Block for making an appearance and posing some interesting questions. I think this was a really informative public information meeting, and just thank you everybody for attending, and please again feel free to reach out if you have any other questions.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.